typing in the chat, and I wanted to get your perspective in terms of what you experienced. And so I wanted to hear your experience of safe spaces and stuff like that for yourself.
Hey, Kojo. Thank you for having me on. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
We can indeed.
Awesome. I guess I can elaborate a little bit more on the statement I made about feeling like my ex-husband was not a safe space. So, and back then I didn't know what it meant to shut down, but I think I have a conflict avoidance style. And at least well, I'm sure you can relate to this. Being Ghanaian, a lot of the times women are not supposed to talk back. You're supposed to be submissive, the buzzword. So I grew up not talking back, being respectful, etc. And that was something that I took into my marriage. But it got to a point where I noticed that anytime I tried to say something, whether or not it was important or just like striking a conversation with my ex-husband, he would immediately change the subject, wouldn't have any thought-provoking comments. He would just change the subject. So I remember one time I was in a wedding. I was the only Black person. Like there were no Hispanics, there were no Asian. Like it was very, very white. So I usually don't feel out of place because most of the time I am in the minority, being the one of few Black people there. But that wedding was very uncomfortable. I was one of the bridesmaids. So I had when I came back home, I told my husband about my experience, and I was trying to explain to him what happened to me that made me feel uncomfortable, and he immediately changed the subject. So I went back into my shell, conflict avoidant, not causing a scene, not talking back. I just got quiet, looked outside the window. He picked me up from the airport. And we get back home, we had a friend over, and he was engaging with her. And I'm thinking like, wait a minute, where's this energy for her, but not for me, your wife, right? So when she left, I told him, I was like, I didn't appreciate how you dismissed me when I was telling you a traumatic experience I had being the only Black person at a white wedding, and you just dismissed me. You didn't even feel like you gave a damn, excuse my language, about my feelings and how I felt that day. And that was the first time he actually like grabbed me and hugged me, and he said he was sorry. However, I didn't feel safe even after that because he would revert back to the dismissal. Anytime I would bring something up, if I had a question, I would always ask him, is this a good time to talk? Usually it's around dinner time or when we're watching like a show we've watched before. And he would say yes, but he would be on his phone the entire time. Or while I'm in the middle of saying something, he would pick up his phone and start texting. And I'll ask him, could you please put that away? And he would just say, well, I mean, I already have the solution for you. I'm like, I didn't even tell you what happened. So, and I'll wrap this up quickly. Towards the end of the marriage, I found this game that I thought we could play on Valentine's Day, actually, that was like 50 questions ripped up in a piece of paper, and we'd alternate taking questions and answering them, right? So the question that I picked was, what's something that your partner doesn't know about you? And there was something I wanted to tell him, but I didn't feel safe telling him, so I told him something else. But it felt like he was not the right person I could express that to at that moment because of the history of him not being engaged, not listening, dismissing, and we had been together for 8 years. So I didn't feel that that was something that was going to improve at that point. And I'll end it there.
Man, okay, boy, that is not easy to go through. Was there any points in that in that relationship where you felt like there was a safe space apart from that one time obviously he hugged you? Did you ever feel like there were other times where he gave you a safe space?
It was there are a handful of moments I could think of, However, I felt that the dismissal, I guess what Dahlia is saying, the disrespect, not being seen, kind of overshadowed the times that I did feel like he saw me.
Mm. Okay, so the times that he saw you, I'm just so I can also understand as well. I'm inquisitive.
Mhm.
I'm inquisitive, by the way. So,
Sure.
the times that he saw you, maybe you don't have to go into actually any detail, but describe what that was like and what he did to make you feel like he saw you. You know what I mean?
So we were having dinner. We tried to have weekly dinner dates when we could, based on his schedule. So we went out to dinner. We were having a conversation about where we're at. We hadn't been engaged yet. So I was asking questions about where he felt we were at in our relationship, what we could do to improve. And he had certain points that he felt that we could improve on. And he asked me the same question. And I told him that I felt that we were at a pretty good place. Unfortunately, since we weren't financially ready, I didn't think it was also safe for us to move forward in the marriage. And he had made a comment. He said, "Why do you think we're not financially ready?" And I said, "Well, I had moved in. We had done long distance for a year and a half. And then we ended up moving for a job that he got together. And he had promised that the um, coach, he was in basketball. He worked for the basketball team at the college
Sick.
we went to. So he said the coach had a lot of connections, and since I was in the medical field, it wasn't going to be hard for me to find a job. But a year goes by, and I was just doing odd jobs here and there. So I told him I felt like
Mm.
I was on a revolving door of getting more into debt when I had worked so hard to get out of it. And he said that I wasn't giving myself enough credit because I worked so hard to get out of it before I could do it again. And that he feels that if anyone were to ever say that I wasn't a hard worker, he would tell him, under the circumstances that I was brought up in, if anything, I by the grace of God, was able to not be a statistic of either being on drugs, being homeless, etc. So it was like he paid me a compliment, but also saw my hard work was, in his mind, paying off, even though I wasn't giving myself enough credit at that moment.
Mm. Mm.
So I would hold
Mm.
on to things like that because, like I said, it was like maybe a handful of moments like that. So when the dismissal would happen, I would feel like maybe the conversation wasn't that important for him to feel like, let's just change the subject. But those were important topics that were never
Mm.
resolved. So I eventually brought it up. Like, I feel like you dismiss me every time I try to talk to you about something important.
I agree that. Sorry, Sean was going to say something. You want to say something, Sean? Maybe you heard what?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Elsie, and thank you for, your honesty and transparency. In that moment when he gave you that compliment, when you were talking about, not wanting to go into debt, was that a moment where you felt like he heard you or he was
Yeah,
caring about you?
yeah, I did.
Hmm.
I
I
did
guess
feel in that moment that he understood my concern and my stresses at that moment. Yeah.
and I'm just going to tell you my opinion, just somebody who's doesn't know you and was just, if I heard that, it sounds like he was just dismissing your concerns about your debt and pretty much telling you to keep doing what you're doing, which wasn't working. So that's what I to me, that sounded like a glazed over way of continuing to dismiss your concerns because you had a legitimate concern, whereas you had relocated for his employment and you hadn't found a job yet. And he says, just keep doing what you're doing because you'll get out of debt again. What, but why should you have to do that, right? Why should you have to get in debt all over again when you moved for an opportunity that he had? it would be, let's figure this out together. If, let me help you. Let me figure out, since you made a sacrifice, I can make a sacrifice. Let's come up with a long-term plan so that you don't go into debt again. So I think it seems like he was either breadcrumbing you a little bit, or it seems like manipulation is what I heard.
And when you phrase it that way, that makes a lot of sense with how even the divorce ended up going, or how the divorce ended up going, because you just heard a snippet of what I did in our relationship. And you're right. I did move for him. Didn't have a job. Kept getting into debt. Did like side things here and there part time. And then when he got another job, we moved again, and I had to take a major, major pay cut. So I finally ended up finding a job, which was great. But then we had to move a year later again because he got an opportunity to work for Texas Tech, and he was able to double his salary, but then I had to take a $15,000 pay cut. And his reason was that this was going to benefit our relationship and our marriage moving forward. And I told him, I get it, but I feel like I'm making more sacrifices, putting myself um, on the back burner just for him to further his career. And he phrased it as, yeah, but me winning means that we are winning. So I trusted it. But then when we were getting a divorce, because at this point he was close to six figures and I was less than half of him, he felt that I didn't deserve half the house, even though I was the reason why we were able to get the house because of my credit score, because I was able to get myself out of debt again and improve my credit score again. So between that and he allegedly cheated on me with our pastor's daughter, he didn't feel I made any sacrifices for him or our relationship in general. So I guess I never thought about it that way, that he was breadcrumbing me or, again, dismissing my concerns.
I just want to apologize, Elsie, because that's a lot, and
Mm,
you know,
Yeah,
sounds like you're on the other side of it, but I'm sorry you had to go through that situation.
mm.
I could write a book. I'll just
You should write a book.
yeah,
You should write a book.
my friends and my sister keep pushing me to write a book because it was insanity what I was living through.
Mm, 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 mm. It's funny because Sean heard what I heard, so I think a few of us did hear it as well. Because when I first heard, I was like, sounds like this goon was he was doing a little wizardry
Mm,
at the point. You know what I mean? But I appreciate you sharing that because I think it does help us understand as well, and I think other people who might be going through something similar, or if they're they're going to get a relationship, they might hear this and now realize and able to spot when other people are trying to put them in that same position as well. And as again, I want to ask a question though.
sure.
So, because we're talking about safe spaces.
Hmm.
So, when obviously he asked you, to take the job, well, when you took a job basically that was gonna cut your finances by dramatically. Of course, I'm sure we're Ghanaian, so the whole submission. It's not really it's our thing, right?
Hmm.
But did you feel safe taking that decision though? So before you took that decision, did you feel safe making that decision?
No, I felt obligated to.
Okay. Why did you say you felt obligated?
Um, the nature of his job took us to small college cities, college towns. And as I said before, it took over a year for me to even find something, which was why I needed to do part time work in the meantime. Um, I felt like this was the best bet of me actually getting to the city, and hopefully, once I got there, maybe I would be able to find something that paid a little bit more. But at the very least, I would have a full time job that had benefits just to like get me to where he was at. but
Okay.
that didn't change. But so no, I didn't feel safe. I felt obligated to take it.
Okay. And your overall feeling at that point, if you can pinpoint it, overall, how did you feel about the relationship at that point? What was your sentiments towards the relationship itself at that particular point when you're having to make that decision? Just before you have to make the decision, what's your sentiment towards the relationship at that point?
Ooh. I think I felt hopeful. I don't know if I have the word for it. I think I felt hopeful, but also felt like it shouldn't be this hard to be with someone you're supposed to be with.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. So, like, the buzzword nowadays is women submitting, trusting a man's leadership. And I wanted to trust his leadership, but I didn't feel, I guess I don't have another way of saying it besides I didn't feel safe. I felt hopeful that he knew what he's doing and I was gonna go where he went.
Mm. Okay. Okay. It's interesting because I wanted to the reason why I was asking was because I was trying to, because this is for the men too, right? This is for the men too. It's not just about women as well. It's for the men too in terms of, like you said, right? Me and Sean talk about this as well, and other men talk about this, right? Talking about how yes, we want our women